Scientists feel the heat, warning we're in danger of reopening too far and too fast. As Britons enjoy the hottest day of the year so far, they caution against loosening lockdown restrictions even further.
Is a gamble that I don't think this country should be taking, given that we have a choice which just involves a few more weeks potentially.
Also ahead, China tells couples they can have up to 3 children as it tries to stem an alarming decline in birth rates. Britain offers to home hundreds of Afghan translators who feared being left behind at the mercy of the Taliban. And one of tennis's biggest stars, Naomi Osaka, withdraws from the French Open, revealing she suffered long bouts of depression.
This is ITV News with Duncan Golestani.
Good evening. Scientists today used the hottest day of the year to increase the heat on the government over the further loosening of lockdown restrictions. As they spoke, millions of us enjoyed a day out in the sun with sights at times resembling the world we used to know before the virus. Of course, there's still some way to go before we get there, but scientists say with cases back on the rise, the government should hold back from the current plan of lifting further restrictions on June the 21st. From Blackpool, Sangeeta Lau reports.
A bank holiday like this doesn't come round often. Many hope it's the beginning of the end as Britain navigates its roadmap out of lockdown. But some worry it could make the journey out of this pandemic even longer. Something no one here wants to see happen.
It's lovely. We've brought our lunch out, so we've sat and had a lunch, and now we're just having an ice cream.
I mean, my baby's been in lockdown. She hasn't really seen the outside world, so it's good.
But as temperatures rise, so too are coronavirus cases. And many are worried this weekend could contribute to a third wave of infections.
People are flocking to the beaches. We all want to be there and in the water. Is a gamble that I don't think this country should be taking, given that we have a choice which just involves a few more weeks potentially, and the summer holidays to allow vaccines to work, allow people to get the second doses.
Here in Blackpool, it really does feel like life as we used to know it. We are tantalisingly close to getting back to some sort of normality, but we're not there yet. As infection rates continue to rise, the prospect of easing restrictions even further in the next 3 weeks still hangs in the balance. Now the race is on between vaccine and virus, with the government aiming to give all over 50s like Joanne their second dose before restrictions are eased again.
I've had my first vaccine and my second one's due on the 16th of June.
And how do you feel that you're going to be able to get your second vaccine before the hopeful unlocking?
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, really, really good, because I feel okay here today after having one vaccine, but I think I'd be more confident had I already had both.
For many, this bank holiday has given people a taste of life before coronavirus. But scientists warn easing restrictions too soon could be a turning point in the country's progress. Sangeeta Lau, ITV News, Blackpool.
Our political correspondent Daniel Hewitt is with us now. So, Dan, we've got a crucial week or two ahead of us.
Yeah, big 2 weeks for the government. They've said they will decide on June the 14th whether they will release restrictions entirely on June the 21st. They've always said there's wriggle room. They've always given themselves wriggle room, that these roadmap dates aren't set in stone. Let's be brutally honest, Duncan, no one knows what's going to happen in 2 or 3 weeks' time. As Sangeeta rightly said, we're in this race now between the vaccine and the virus, in particular the India variant. It's hard to argue anything but this country running that race as fast as we can. I was down at Twickenham today. They've turned the rugby stadium into a mass vaccination centre. 15,000 vaccines up for grabs. Anyone over the age of 18 could go down and get their first Pfizer jab. They were queuing around the block. The good news is that the Pfizer vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine are highly effective against the India variant, study shows, but only after 2 doses. And that's what worries scientists. Yes, the government's likely to vaccinate everyone over 50 by June 21st. They're not going to vaccinate everyone under 50 by that date. Is it really going to risk unlocking everything if everyone hasn't had those 2 doses? Big couple of weeks for the government.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Dan. In a major change of policy, China has announced it will allow couples to have up to 3 children in the hope of slowing the country's rapidly ageing population. A previous shift from the decades-old one-child policy to a limit of 2 children has failed to address the imbalance which Communist Party leaders fear could undermine China's economic progress. Sejal Karia reports.
In 21st century China, it is still the government that dictates how many children a family can have. And it has decided they are not having enough. So it has upped its limit, allowing married couples to have 3 children instead of 2, to deal with a looming economic crisis of an ageing population. Do you believe then that this change in policy will work?
It's a very big challenge. If 2 children policy works well, then why now all of a sudden there are 3 children policy? So that indicates the 2 children policy was not so effective.
Home to 1.4 billion people, China has the largest population in the world. But it's one that's rapidly aging, has a shrinking pool of people of working age and a birth rate that's slumping, all posing a major threat to this economic powerhouse. In 1979, China had exactly the opposite problem, introducing its strict one-child policy to reduce its enormous population. But by 2016, the growth had slowed to such an extent, the one-child policy was abandoned and replaced with a 2-child limit, but it hasn't worked. The increasing costs of raising a child has been a driving factor.
Without very good maternity leave and also childcare and also preschool education facilities, then women really have big concern.
And many experts believe today's major policy shift tells us a lot about the survival of the Chinese nation, that it's in crisis. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
Hundreds more Afghan interpreters and their families are to be allowed to settle in the UK as international troops prepare to leave the country. Ministers call it a moral obligation, but campaigners argue there are still gaps in the scheme, leaving those who helped British forces at risk. As Dan Rivers explains, many interpreters are still so afraid they keep their identities a secret.
So he said when the Russians were here.
They worked shoulder to shoulder with British troops during the most dangerous missions in Afghanistan, and many have since faced threats from the Taliban. Today the government announced it was accelerating a scheme to allow interpreters and other staff who worked with the British Army to emigrate to the UK.
With the Western powers leaving Afghanistan, the threat is increasing and has increased with targeted attacks against Afghans by the Taliban. So we think it's the right thing to do to stand by these people.
One translator who just brought his wife to the UK after a 6-year wait told me the Taliban death threats have increased.
The situation there is unfortunately getting worse and worse, especially for interpreters, especially for those people who worked for international society.
The government estimates a further 3,000 interpreters with their families will join the 1,400 already here. But campaigners say some 35% of translators were dismissed for minor transgressions of the rules while serving and must now be included.
We need the government to actively reach out to those people who they have previously rejected on that basis. You know, as recent as late April, some of them got rejections on that basis for having phoned their family to say that they were safe. You know, that was considered a security breach because they were carrying a SIM card or a mobile phone.
One translator who's just learnt he'll be allowed to move to the UK is worried many others will miss out.
Here are many of Afghan interpreters left behind and some security guards, also laborers and also mechanics. They have also helped the UK government.
With the US announcing its complete withdrawal from Afghanistan by September, there is now a new imperative to relocate the remaining locals who helped our soldiers before it's too late. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
A vigil has been held in North London to remember a flower seller who was stabbed to death on Saturday. Hundreds of friends and family paid tribute to Tony Eastlake, who worked in the area for nearly 40 years before being killed nearby. Police are still searching for the person responsible. And a temporary evictions ban put in place by the government to help renters in England during the pandemic has come to an end today. Housing charities say 1 million households could be left homeless in just a few weeks. Global tennis star Naomi Osaka has pulled out of the French Open for mental health reasons. The world #2 said she's been struggling with depression since she won the US Open in 2018. It follows mounting criticism over her decision not to take part in press conferences or interviews during this month's tournament in Paris. Chris Scudder has more. And that is it for now. The weather forecast follows. From all of us here, thank you very much for watching and good night.